Our culture is hyper-consumed with stardom and popularity. Influencing as a profession has been made a reality, and the idea of forgiveness and grace have seemingly been eliminated altogether.
What frustrates me more than anything is that posting on social media has completely annihilated mistake making and forgiveness and redemption. Okay? We were all granted that growing up. We made our mistakes, we screwed up, we may have messed up on the job, but we were granted a chance to apologize, forgiveness, and a do-over. These kids don't get do-overs. Once it's put out there, it can impact if they get into the college of their dreams, if they get a good job, if they keep that job. So I think that's really unfortunate because at a time when our kids are still growing and should be granted the grace of mistake making, they don't get it. And that's tough. That's unfair, and it's unfortunate for this younger generation.
Today on The Balanced Voice, we sit down for a refreshing and grace-filled conversation with one of our longtime partners, Dominique Sachse. Dominique has been an evening news anchor at Houston's KPRC Channel 2 for 25 years. She's a wife, a mother, a well-respected influencer with more than 1.4 million subscribers on YouTube, and she embodies all things good and empowering about Houston. In today's conversation, Dominique shares her journey through her life's most fulfilling accomplishments, and we ultimately answer this question. How do we as women exemplify grace-filled influencing and in turn raise up a generation who stands firm in their convictions? Without further ado, here's your host, Renia Mancarios. Welcome to the Balanced Voice podcast. We are thrilled to have one of our favorites, our local Dominique Sachse is with us. She's local to us, but you all know her. Good morning, Dominique. How are you?
Hey, Rania. I'm so happy to be with you. For your audience who might not know, you and I have a very long history as community members and people who support our community in very different ways. And I feel blessed to have worked with you in the past in supporting Crime Stoppers. And I am thrilled that you're doing this podcast and that your reach is growing, your message is growing. And so can I just say that I'm honored to be with you today?
This means the world to us. When we set out to do this podcast, there were inspirational figures. If we were to map it out, people we really wanted to join us. I always say Matthew McConaughey is a Texas gem. He just joined us. And then you are one of them. We said, she is, everything that Houston aspires to be. She personifies us at our best. And so it is absolutely an honor for you to be with us. I want to dive in, doing sort of a throwback. Our premiere episode, we had Dave Ward and Bill Baeza, and it was really interesting to have the two of them side by side and talking to these media legends about their experience through journalism and media through the years. And I had to ask you the same. How has media changed since you joined over 25 years ago now to today?
I think the question is, how has it not changed? And I'm sure those two gentlemen probably could have a longer explanation of that since they were in the industry much longer than I have been, even though, a 25 plus tenure is sizable. I'm not going to downplay that. But obviously, the biggest change has been in the messaging and where people are going to get their messaging. And so back then, news was appointment television. You checked your watch and you made it a part of your schedule to sit down and to take in the world, the nightly news and the local news. And that was your only source aside from the 2 or 3 different newspapers back in the day that were delivered to your house. So now you have this world where everything's at your fingertips and you have a dying off audience that still likes appointment television. And you have this younger, newer audience that doesn't. They're busy. They have other things going on. I would say attention span maybe isn't the same as our generation to actually sit there. For them, they want to get what they want and they don't want to feel like their time's being wasted with information that they don't want. So the media is having to change to now try to bring in this audience, because if you don't bring in the younger generation, you're losing your industry and you're having to completely redefine and reshape what is broadcast news. So obviously you've seen this huge influx and this push to web and social, this specific targeting of information, push alerts and things like that. So, and also looping in the talent to have their own name, their own brand, to also get out there on Instagram and Facebook and talk about the stories that they're working on, which is then shared by KPRC. So it's this whole network, this web network that's going on of getting content out there to A, get them to your website, and then B, hopefully loop it back. And if there's enough interest in what they're seeing, to then come back to the broadcast television side and watch it there. So it's this sort of cyclical process that's starting to happen when it comes to getting content out.
And, we've talked to so many people about this, and I'm sitting here listening to you thinking no one has ever explained it that beautifully. Honestly, that was such a good explanation of where we've come, because it makes total sense. And we hear people, we work with the media every day, and people will say, well, it's so sensationalized. Well, and it's like, well, no, you have a shorter time frame to grab somebody's attention and say, hey, this is important to look at. We have found national mainstream media to be interesting in terms of, we talked about this with John Quinones, how they sort of add in some adjectives, their own sort of, some people call it bias, some people are fine with it. But I still think that local media has just become and is the truest news source, really, for communities. As we work with you, Dominique, one of the things that's very interesting and that we struggle with is getting women engaged. And this is why I think you're so fascinating, because you have an unbelievable following. Let's just look at the numbers. 1.43 million YouTube subscribers, which is
astonishing. It blows my mind too. Trust me.
It's unbelievable. And I'm reading, and preparing for this interviews that you did almost a year or 2 years ago, and your numbers just doubled. I mean, it was, 250,000, then it was 500,000. The next interview, she celebrates 1 million. And it's been since 2014. I know you've been working on this for some time, but you've exploded online, and it's so, and rightfully so. 274,000 followers on Instagram. You've clearly tapped into the woman, the female consumer, and you've done so through this notion of living bold and beautiful. But I'm curious how it translates for you on the anchor desk. And do you find sometimes that women are able to connect more to you, the YouTube influencer, than they are to you, the journalist? Is there a disconnect there for you?
I would say maybe not so much a disconnect. I would say the viewer who watches me on YouTube and also watches me on Channel 2, I think feels a completely different sense about who I am because of what I offer on YouTube. As you know, I'm very unzipped. I'm very transparent. I'm in my bathroom, no makeup. I'm vulnerable. I put it out there. I talk about aging and ways to correct through makeup or hair or whatnot. I'm in it with them. And so I think maybe that authenticity and being very organic and true to myself has sort of opened up my audience in the broadcast side. Now, granted, the content is completely different. So when I initially started the channel, I have to say there was a little bit of hesitation and reservation of, I'm a journalist and I've been doing this for a long time. Will the viewers see that this is trivial? Will they see it as, here's another anchor talking about hair and makeup? But it was very important to me that the channel was so much more than just tutorials. And sure, there are a lot of tutorials sprinkled in there, but as I started to do a deep dive into really what I wanted to put out there, and as a woman who started the platform in her mid-40s and now was going through a big life transition, going through menopause, going through what it means to be a woman 50 plus in the workplace, what it means to be a woman who's losing her hormones and, raising teenagers and all of that, I wanted to bring that to the table and to have those conversations and discussions and say, hey, I feel this too, and I'm experiencing this too, and this is what's working for me. And I've done interviews with doctors, with psychologists, with women in the hormone replacement arena, you name it, because I want the conversation to be about women in their prime, looking, feeling, and being their best. So it's not just the external. It may start that way, but it's about really unzipping and getting inside and living your best life when it comes to who you are as a person. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you nurturing yourself, your relationships, your career? Are you a good steward of your home? Is it a mess, or is it representative of who you are and who you want to be as a person? So I think then, as those things started to happen, that concern about, oh, she's doing a hair or makeup tutorial, and is it taking away from her journalistic side, didn't concern me at all, because I people got to see me as the whole woman. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. And what's so interesting about it is the fact that, one of the questions we were going to ask you was, were you worried about starting this YouTube channel, given that we're told, so, be good at one thing, give it your all, sort of self-brand yourself with that one thing. You want to really hone in on your skill. And then here you came showing two very different sides of your personality, and in a way that connects so much with viewers. There had to have been some fear and hesitation there. But what I found so interesting is when COVID struck, all of a sudden there was this push for authenticity. I was being told, people want to see you on the couch with your hair in a bun with no makeup on, just talking about public safety. And I thought, I looked at major cable news journalists who would have like sessions in their bathrobes, and it became what you did so many years before, connecting with people in a very raw and real way, became actually what people wanted as a community and as a society when times got tough. So I think that vulnerability and that rawness is what has drawn 1.43 million people to your channel, and you're providing such great content that everyone can use. I know you say women in their prime, but it's really for girls of all ages, women of all ages.
I think too, and what you mentioned is those moments, honestly, are the great unifier, because those are the things that show that we're all in the same boat together. And a great example of that is how we all went through the Texas deep freeze.
Yeah.
It didn't matter where you lived, what your socioeconomic background was, none of that mattered. Everybody was cold. Everybody suffered. Most everybody lost their power. Most everybody had water issues. And we were all having to figure this thing out together. And when you put it out there, then the person down the street who doesn't know you, or maybe who says, well, I can't connect to that person's life, suddenly says, hey, she's having the same experience I am. We're not so different after all. And that's the point. We really are not so different after all. And that's a message that I want to get across to women, is that I hear you and I feel you. And, external things may look a little bit different, but deep inside, we can feel the same things. And it's important we get those things out and talk about it.
As you work so hard and you do such an incredible job connecting with women, we as an organization sometimes struggle with connecting with women when it comes to public safety messaging. And what I found so interesting is when we went to launch this podcast, we were very fortunate to sit with an executive from MTV and an executive from Spotify who really helped us shape what we were doing. And these women said, the number one podcasts right now are all in the genre of true crime. And the number one consumer is women. They love this type of content. But when you flip that and you say, well, let's go have a public safety conversation, sometimes women say, you know what? It's too close, or I already have enough stress in my day. I'm juggling kids and work and a spouse and home. It's too much. And there seems to be some type of a resistance when it feels too close to home. Given that you sit at the anchor desk every day and you're the one that gives us the most important information going on in our city and county, do you ever see a resistance? Do you ever wonder how we need to message to women differently?
I think, to me, as a news anchor, but also a consumer, because as I'm delivering the news, I'm also consuming the news. And there are some stories that touch me more than others as I'm delivering. And usually the ones that touch me more are the ones that show the human impact. So crime that just starts with murder, robbery, home invasion, it's an immediate turnoff, right? But if it starts with a mother of two at home, homeschooling her children in the middle of the day, faced two robbers at gunpoint, suddenly my ears are listening
Mm.
because it's now more relatable. I have I have a human involved, right? It is the human element. And so crime and these words without the human element and the human impact don't have meaning or interest. But if I can relate to that human impact, that mom who's, maybe at home and who's having to tutor her children who are working online from school because of COVID, and in the middle of the day when she thinks she's safe, suddenly two armed men burst in, I'm listening. And so it's the way the story is told. It's like basic journalism 101. And I wish that there were, still even in-house almost lessons from the senior producers to the younger producers in terms of how to write a story, because how you write and how you tell that story is going to directly impact who's going to want to come in and listen to that story. But if you just start off with, a home invasion in Southeast Houston leaves, one wounded.
Mm.
I'm not there. But a mother at home with her two children, tutoring them, faces two armed men in the middle of the day, I'm there. It's the way a story is written. It's the way that it's told. And that to me is what really impacts women the most. How is this crime going to affect my life? Can I connect? Can I relate in some way? And not only that, are there things that I can do to better protect myself in the process? Are there lessons to be gleaned out of this story instead of just, here's what happened?
That's a big area that we always want to look at and work on, because we do think providing solutions, tangible solutions, not about being paranoid, but providing real solutions that you
Right.
can implement to ensure your safety. Those are always positive, good things. I always say, just as you take care of your skin, you take care of your health, to be public safety minded is not being paranoid.
Mhm.
It's just thinking smartly.
Yeah.
As you work and I think I've read everything about you at this point. I know you're a University of Houston alum, and I think you still
Yep.
have a heart for working with students there. As you see these young kids up and coming and the pressure to trend and be consumed and to get the likes and the views, it just overwhelms almost even the content sometimes.
Yeah.
Where do you start with that? This next generation of whether reporters, journalists, or just online users, how do you guide them?
It's tough because this generation is so hyper consumed with celebrity.
Mm.
Celebrity means more than the content itself. And so that's concerning to me. When you are more concerned about how many likes you have, or comments, or followers, or channels, or whatever, and it's a numbers game, then you'll start to do almost anything to increase that. And there are lines that will be crossed. And I see that in our young girl. I see it everywhere. But what I see being posted by the younger generation is shocking to me. It's shocking. The amount of body shots that girls are putting out there, or G-strings at young ages. I'm horrified. I'm horrified by it. There are so many ramifications, not to mention just self-esteem and how you view yourself and your self-worth, but also safety issues that come from all of that, as you well know. And I know you've had many talks about all of that. So my concern is with prioritizing celebrity, you're willing to do more and you're willing to cross more lines that shouldn't be crossed. So, and I've also, by the way, I've also seen people, aspiring journalists, that women who still do those sexy shots. And let me tell you, managers are looking, and it completely taints the respect level that you're going to receive. If you're trying to be a journalist, a reporter, a sportscaster, an anchor, whatever, and you're doing the sexy body shot on Instagram, they see it. Your viewer sees it. How will your viewer take you seriously? How will a woman at a certain age even want to tune in to watch you if you're sitting there targeting 20-year-old boys? It's a forward-thinking mentality, and that's the problem. Everybody's thinking right now, but you have to think, what are my actions now? How are they going to impact my future? And those are conversations that have to be had with the younger generation. These are conversations that I have with my son, with my bonus children. All this stuff lives. Everything that you put out there, there's no shelf life. It's out there and it can be found at any time. So please be mindful of what you're doing. Please be respectful of who you are, and make sure that what you're putting out, if you're trying to be a journalist, inform. If you're trying to be, whatever, inform, but don't be a body shot. It just makes me crazy.
This balanced conversation is made possible by Brigitte and Bashar Kalai, Hallie Vanderheider, Sippy and AJ Karana, and Deepwater Productions. If you're interested in furthering our mission of facilitating balanced conversations, offering real solutions, contact us at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com.
You're making me think of Alexi McCammond, the Teen Vogue staffer who recently got her dream job at Teen Vogue, but just as quickly lost it because decade-old tweets that she had posted were dug up and resurfaced, and she was fired immediately. And, we had this conversation on the podcast with Matthew McConaughey, who said these social media posts will outlive you. They will become your brand and message. And to hear you say the same thing, it's really compelling because you're two people that are in the industry. You live this every day, day in and day out, and you see how decisions are made about whether it's up and coming talent or affiliates or partners. You see people looking and making judgments based on social media. I do want to ask you, you mentioned safety. We strive every day to talk to kids about, and moms and parents and everybody about safety when they're posting. And there seems to be this disconnect with what you post on the online world. Every September, August, I always sort of cringe when I see the onslaught of photos of, first graders or third graders that, shows their school uniform, their teacher's name, what school they go to, their favorite hobbies. I mean, people share so much online. You share so much online, but you keep yourself so safe, and it doesn't keep you from posting and sharing. So how do you navigate? How do you tell younger kids to do the same?
Awareness of that, making sure, for instance, all children's accounts are private and that they can only follow friends and be followed by friends. So, you have to have those safeguards in place. These accounts cannot be accessible to everybody and anybody. So, you have to learn, Snapchat, you have to learn Instagram, you have to learn where they are and get in those settings, right? And it is hard. It's hard. It's not the easiest thing, but making sure that there are as many privacy controls as possible. I have always been, if I had a picture of my son and he had a school uniform logo, well, I would go into a photo editing software and I would just erase it. So there are no identifiers. And I think you have to think about those things, street locations, whatever it is, comb through a photo, and if there and never do the location where it shares where you are, turn that off. There are a lot of safeguards that can be put into place where it can be a safe thing to share a child with their teacher at school without identifying anybody or anything. But you must be thinking about those things before you post, because like you said, Rania, once it's out there, it's out there. And, like that staffer at Teen Vogue, this is really the downside of social media, because our children's brains, they're not developed enough yet to fully understand the consequences and the magnitude of all of this. And on top of it, teenagers are teenagers. They're going to make mistakes. It's a part of life. It's a part of growing up. What frustrates me more than anything is that posting on social media has completely annihilated mistake making and forgiveness and redemption. Okay. We were all granted that growing up. We made our mistakes. We screwed up. We may have messed up on the job, but we were granted a chance to apologize, forgiveness, and a do-over. These kids don't get do-overs. Once it's put out there, it can impact if they get into the college of their dreams, if they get a good job, if they keep that job. So I think that's really unfortunate because at a time when our kids are still growing and should be granted the grace of mistake making, they don't get it. And that's tough. That's unfair and it's unfortunate for this younger generation.
I completely agree with you. And to your point, the conversations have to be had at home and we have to be doing our part to make our kids socially aware, but to have no room for an error ever anywhere, it's not a sustainable threshold.
No, it's not. And it's not fair to children. And the psychological and the emotional fallout is life lasting. And I think that's devastating.
Dominique, how do you find, with doing so much and you're growing, you're still just growing in this beautiful way. How do you find a balance between all that you do? Or do you find a balance? Let me ask that a different way.
Oh, that's funny. Balance. Honestly, there's no such thing because here's the deal. And this is sort of how I feel about it. There are some weeks where work is going to prevail, right? There are just some weeks where you're slammed with work. There are some weeks where you feel like you're going to have a little more time with family and with your kids. Or there's some weeks you'll feel like you'll have more time for you, for self-care and for exercise. And for me, it's sort of like an overall monthly assessment. I sort of look at the old school calendar and I write everything down because I'm a visual sort of person. I need to see what's going on. But if I feel overall, there's a sense of balance between all of it. And it's not a daily measure. It could be a weekly measure. It could be a monthly measure. Then I feel okay with that. But if I try to create balance in a day, it's impossible. It'll never be achieved. So I think we all have to figure out what that is and what it looks like. It's as unique and individual as we are. But, balance, whew, yeah.
So there's a lot of grace there. And I love that because
there must be.
There's guilt too for those of us who, again, you work, you have your kids, you have your husband.
Yes.
Your life. There's some feeling of, you just can't do it all and it becomes overwhelming.
Right.
I read this in one of the articles about you now being on the Today Show, I think twice, right?
Yes.
COVID. And so this is funny. So Dominique is so graceful and she's been with us at our Crime Stoppers Gala now for a few years. And we were sitting together. Was it last year? I think it was last year. And my husband said, guess where she's going tomorrow? And I, where's she going? And he said, New York. I said, oh, great, New York. And he goes, for the Today Show. And I think I fainted backwards because while we look exactly alike, Dominique and I mean, if you saw us walking, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. We also share this lifelong dream of being on the
Today Show.
And we look nothing alike, by the way.
It's got nothing to do with anything.
I mean, you and I next to each other. Anyway, I'm sorry, whatever. Anyway, so I loved that happened for you. And I love this thing. You said, somebody asked you about it. You said it was surreal, unbelievable. And I love this. You said, truly a God moment. I will share this with you. It had always been my dream to be on the Today Show. I prayed about it often when I was younger and in the beginning stages of my career. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you when you actually went?
It showed me, and I'm a person of faith. So it showed me that God answers us in his way. It may be his timing, his purpose, his messaging, and not necessarily ours. Katie Couric, back when she was on the Today Show, to me was this phenomenal mix of intelligence. I mean, she could handle any interview, any head of state, any politician. She could do a cooking segment, a fashion show, the banter with her co-anchor. I mean, it was, if you had all of that going in your toolkit, that format was to me the best format to be able to showcase it. So that's why I had always put Today's Show up on this pedestal as sort of the end game goal. And as life evolved and priorities started to shift and change, and I got older, quality of life became very important. Balance and stability became important as I became a wife and I became a mother. And staying here in Houston and having that kind of protection and a company that valued me, and I had security and I had, great contracts. And so it made more sense every contract cycle to stay because I had a really, really good quality of life. I felt present as a mom and present as a news anchor. It was the best of all worlds. But I have to say, it was so ironic showing up on the Today Show in the way that I did. It wasn't as co-host or co-anchor, but it was as me being able to feature something that I had created for myself. And I thought, wow, that's powerful. That is something I never would have dreamed of. And sometimes I think God likes to surprise us that way. He says dream, but I may meet you even higher. And he did. And so to me, that was being met even higher than my dream because I got the dream of being a newscaster and being present as a mother. I got that. But then to be able to show up on the Today Show and do what I did and have fun with the gals in this venue and format was, I don't know, it was like an out-of-body experience. I can't quite explain it, but it was fun. Today's show set, by the way, is so much smaller than you ever think it would be. There are people standing around everywhere. This is pre-COVID. People sitting on the floor doing social media and texting. I'm stepping over people and cables. And I'm like, wow, this is the Today Show. My set is so much bigger than this. So there were many surprises there too. But the staff and the people, hands down, are phenomenal. They're amazing and so kind-hearted. So I felt very welcomed.
The reason I know about the Today Show set is because probably once a month since third grade, I would walk by the studio and sort of peer in through the windows.
Yes.
And see everything covered. So you literally see how small it is. But I love in reading about you, your colleagues to articles, actually say that you're introverted. You've said that you're introverted, but you don't hide your faith and you're so graceful and so kind in everything you do. And that's just one of the things we love about you. Somebody would say you've reached the top. You've done it all. Is there something that you're still dreaming to do that you haven't done?
Yeah. And it's in the works.
Ooh. Okay, we won't ask you what it is now unless you feel compelled to tell us.
I can't say, but there's definitely something that was placed in my heart that is in the works that I'm very excited about. And I can't wait to be able to share. So maybe next podcast, Rania.
Maybe next podcast. Can you give us a time frame? Is it in 2021 or not? You're not sure?
Probably not.
Okay. So 2022, we'll be waiting for you back on the Balanced Voice podcast to break that news. You again, we're just so thrilled for everything you've done. We encourage people to follow you. You're so inspiring. You're so uplifting in your posts. You actually provide such unbelievable content. And I've had so many friends share things with me that say, hey, you need to be doing this, which I love. And whether it's running to a drugstore, I had a friend watch one of your entire shows, run to a local drugstore and get everything you mentioned. And what was so great about it is that it was drugstore products and we tried them all and we loved it. You're just such an inspiration. We thank you for your partnership with Crime Stoppers of Houston. You lend your voice and your brand and your image to the powerful work that we do because you have a heart for this city that you've grown up in and that you give back to every day. So we just thank you, Dominique, and we look forward to doing more together in the weeks and years to come.
Yeah, I look forward to that too. And I look forward to also seeing how you expand your messaging and the different ways in which you reach the viewer, the audience, the community member, the woman. I think that, as time evolves, just like I found a new opportunity, I think there are always opportunities. And it's, for instance, here you are with a microphone and a podcast. Once upon a time, if you wanted to broadcast something, you had to be hired by a broadcast entity in order to put content out there, and it had to be their content. Look at what an amazing array of content and information we now have access to just because of how the landscape has changed. You have all of these podcasts, all of these channels, all of this messaging. So that's a gift. And I know you see it as such. And I think for you, it's an amazing opportunity to be able to expand your reach and to open up that dialogue about how important community safety is, how important that we all take a proactive role in our community. And there's so many different ways that we can do that. And I applaud you for your messaging, Rania, and you getting everybody together, whether it's law enforcement or, civic groups or whatever your approach, but just prioritizing it because people do need to feel safe in their communities. It's the most important thing. It's what drives news content, by the way, is feeling safe in your community. And, I'm proud of you and what you're doing. And I salute you, my dear.
I've never cried on a podcast. Today might be the day. That meant the world to us, honestly. And to your point, we started the podcast to expand the message. And I'm fortunate enough to work with the best team, the two women behind the camera right now, Sydney and Elizabeth, and Tanya, who's upstairs in our building. And we have these incredible conversations with people like you who help us expand the landscape. So we continue to thank you. We continue to thank you for lending your voice to our mission and our cause. And we just look forward to all that's ahead. Dominique Sachse, thank you again for being our guest on the Balanced Voice podcast.
Thank you, Rania. Good to see you again.
Good to see you and everybody else. We'll catch you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Rania's work by following her at The Rania Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.